Goes through. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Autonomy Season 1. I'm Chris McMillon. I'm here with Colin Dixon, shining member of Autonomy Season 1. Colin, how are you today?
I'm fine. It's good here. I'm in Australia at the moment. It's 8:30 in the morning on Monday. So what time and day is it for you?
In Texas, it is 5:20, almost 5:30 in the evening. So yeah, good time difference there, but we always can make room for each other, especially skills we learned from the autonomy class.
Yeah,
Colin, you've been in education for a long time. You've been a teacher for many years in the Australian public school system.
yep.
I was going to ask you, just tell us a little bit about that, and what would you say to someone who was, if they were to come up to you and say, so what's the problem with public schooling? What would you tell them? What would you talk to them about?
Yeah, well, I started in 1980 and I taught for 7 years. And then I was self-employed as an IT person in different businesses, my own business ventures for 23 years. Then I went back in 2009 as an emergency relief teacher. And had a lot of experience. I probably taught in 50 schools over the next 10 years. And of course, there was a drastic change in that 23 years that I was away. I'd be very cautious about considering a profession in teaching in today's modern age because the system is failing and failing badly. And the focus of why it's failing is because there are so many bad teachers out there. And the teachers are now in the position of being totally disempowered, and any complaint against the teacher, no matter how frivolous, is taken very seriously in this age of political correctness. Particularly the male teachers, they're very vulnerable out there to being victimised and blamed for what's going on. But what's really failing is the system. Common Core has been brought in, and Common Core is not about teaching, it's not about education, it's about schooling. And
Sorry, Colin, I lost you right there at the end. You said it's about schooling and?
not about education. It's not about thinking. It's about teaching students what to think and not teaching students how to think.
Why do you think male teachers are having a harder time than female teachers?
Well, in the schools that I was in, there is a predominance of children from single families, single mum families usually. In fact, I don't even remember teaching a child that was from a single dad family. I know they're out there, but I don't. And out of hundreds of kids that I've had, I haven't been aware of one in that situation. And most of the children in, say, two-parent families, the father there is not their father. So there's that. And so children in that situation probably have conflict with the male in their family. And when that comes into the school, that comes in, and I'm the male in the school. And we're also, males are scarce in the schooling system. Probably about 30% of the teachers in secondary are male, and in primary it's probably about 10%.
And you were teaching science, is that right?
Yeah, my training is physics. So physics is the mathematics of science. I probably taught more mathematics than science, but math science, yes.
And what grades did you teach, and how many years were you a teacher?
Let me think. Overall, 7 plus 12, so 19 years in total. 7 years, then a big gap, then 9 years. And I taught everything from middle primary, say grade 3, grade 4, up to grade 12.
Okay. So you got into some trouble, yeah? You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, I had a dispute with the administration at the last school I was at. And the dispute was along these lines, is that behaviour management is a team responsibility at the school, and the teacher has responsibilities for the management within their classroom. And when the students elevate to a certain level, the administration needs to step in. A teacher can't suspend a child by themselves. That's the job of the deputy in the schools and the principal ultimately, or the principal is more of an administrator, not involved in the teaching side of the schools. So the deputies look after the teaching side of the school. And if the deputies don't do their job, there's basically no behaviour management possible by the teacher in the classroom. And they went through a process which, well, I basically complained that my deputies weren't doing their job to the principal, and their counterclaim to that was that I wasn't doing my job as a teacher. And anyway, I was there for 5 terms, and in that time we had 4 principals and about 6 deputies. The school was only a small school. It had 400 students at the school, 100 in the secondary section and 300 in the primary. It only went to year 10.
Yeah.
So we only had 100 students, and it was having behaviour problems or having management problems at the school. It was well documented in a department review that said the school was having problems. They gave the school an extra deputy. So we had 3 deputies and 1 principal for that size school, which is unusual. It was borderline whether it required more than 1 deputy, but because it had the primary school and the secondary section, they allowed it to have 2 deputies. But we had a second deputy in the secondary school all the time I was there. In fact, one term we had 2 extra deputies, which is a $150,000 a year additional expense. And with the extra deputy in looking after 100 kids in the secondary school, the behaviour problems were still massive, and they were, the deputies, I feel a bit sorry for them. They were fairly hamstrung with what they could do, but even with what they could do, they weren't doing their job. And of course, when the maths teacher points out that they're not doing their job and they need to do their job, that's not taken very well. Anyway, the principal didn't do anything about that, so I reported the principal for not doing his job as well to the regional director. Very bad move. Very bad move. Anyway.
Why extra deputies at this school? Was it a troubled school? Was it, why? Why more deputies than necessary?
The term before it, they have a computer system where they record behaviour events that are beyond the normal. And the behaviour events are assaults. So if a student assaults another student or a teacher, and that was happening quite a bit, that gets reported. If they have illegal substances, alcohol or drugs, that gets reported. So there's 9 categories of reporting of extra behaviour. Anyway, in this school, the term before I arrived, they had 121 behaviour reports. Now, these reports don't go in for the primary students because primary students have 1 teacher in the classroom and they can manage all the behaviour. There's an occasional one from the primary school, but that would be 1 or 2 a term. Doesn't happen really. So we had 121 reports in the term before I arrived with 100 students. That's a lot.
So was it,
for example,
quote unquote bad school, or is this normal?
Well, according to the deputies and the principals, it was a good school. The term in the review was it was casually comfortable. In other words, the deputies didn't have that many problems because they weren't dealing with problems. So for their point of view, it wasn't that hard. But from the point of view of the teachers, now there was 1 maths teacher, 1 science teacher, 1 English teacher, and 1 humanities teacher. They call them HAS here in Australia. It's history, geography. Okay. I'm not even sure. So, and then there was 4 academic teachers, and then we had 4 other teachers, and that was woodwork, metalwork, the trade fellow. There was the home economics lady who did cooking and sewing and those things. There was an art teacher, and there was a PE sports teacher. So the students were doing half academic and half non-academic, we call them,
Yeah.
subjects. All the academics,
hands on.
all the academic staff turned over during the year that I was at the school. So some of the positions, the HAS teacher turned over 3 times. I was there for 5 terms, so that's a year and a term. So 1.25 years. The English teacher changed twice. The science teacher changed once, and the maths teacher changed twice, and I was the maths teacher in the middle.
Why so much turnover?
Because it was a horrible school to teach at for teachers.
Is this because of management, or just because what school is really all about in general?
This school was particularly bad. You wouldn't send your children there. I said there was 100 students. Okay, when I got there, there was about 110, and 5 terms later, there was 80 enrolled. So 30, which is about 25% of them, or 30% of the students had left the school. So parents were pulling their students out and sending them to the Catholic schools or the private schools in Perth, in town. We're about 60 kilometres from Perth.
Okay. So you made a complaint about the deputy and then the principal. And then
yes.
What happened?
Nothing. Oh, nothing about the complaint. Well, okay, the complaint to the principal went nowhere. He blamed me. So I then made a complaint about the school, not the principal, about what was happening at the school. It was a 4-page letter to the deputy regional director, and she replied back that she would get back to me shortly, and she didn't get back to me. She didn't reply to me, and they'd started putting me through a process to get me dismissed. And this is part of Common Core. So Common Core has what you're supposed to teach the students. It's all broken down into year levels, and for example, in grade 5, they're supposed to be able to learn the basics of fractions and be able to add fractions up. So multiplying fractions is easier than adding if you remember your maths. So you learn to multiply fractions first, then you divide them, then you add them, then you subtract them.
Yeah.
And so your students learn at different rates, and they're not already at the same time. So you've got a group of 25 to 30 students in your classroom, and according to Common Core, you've got to teach them the same thing at the same time, and they've got to be ready for it, which doesn't work, particularly when they don't want to learn.
That's where it all goes wrong, as we both well know.
Yeah. So, but anyway, they will put me through a process of dismissal, and I got a letter from somebody at head office saying that they were going to run me through another process, which was going to result in me being terminated, my position being sacked. I actually had a permanent position, and all the people who were criticising me were acting in their roles and did not have permanent positions. So that was, and I was older, knew more about, they were all younger than me. I'd say I'm 60, so they would have been mostly in their 40s, so substantially younger than me. And they were trying to get permanent positions, and the school had lost 3 principals in the year or 2 before I was there. So the principals were having troubles. One of the principal that I was there in the first time was assaulted by one of the year 10 boys, and he was walking around with a black eye for the next couple of weeks. So this is the sort of thing that was happening at the school. And but they targeted me for dismissal from the very beginning. And the process is a well-known documented process. If you Google whistleblower gaslighting, you'll know what was going on. So the process they put you through is there. Here we're there to help you. We need to focus on this standard. One of the standards is on Common Core for teaching is differentiation. Standard 5.1, I know it well, which means you are required to differentiate the program for the students. So you're supposed to provide work for the student that's at their level that they can do and will do. Now the key issue there is will do. If a student refuses to do the work, clearly you have not met the standard, because if you'd given them the right work at the right level, they would have done that work.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, but that was their definition of that standard. And So they focused on that one. There was a lot of students in my class, of course, who were not working, refusing to work, and getting up, walking around, because in my class I wasn't allowed to give them detentions. Well, sorry, I was supposed to give them detentions, but if they didn't come, it didn't matter. There was no consequence. That process broke down, so I just taught the kids in the classroom that knew how to talk or wanted to learn. And it was one of the classes. I had a fair bit of success. Another class had reasonable success, and there was one class which I had, they were year 7s and their year 8s. That's the one I lost most of the students out of. We had 30 students when I started in year 7. There were 19 students left in that class by the time I was sacked. And in that class, the top mark was 44%. And there were 3 students in that class who were really good kids, and they were very weak at maths, and they tried to do some work when they could. And it was basically a shit fight every single day that I had this group. And the kids were coming and going, leaving the classroom as they wanted to, coming back in. And they were trying to break me, of course, because they expected me to resign. But I don't take things personally. I know how to handle myself. They're only kids. I felt sorry for the kids, really, because I couldn't do anything. I provided them lots of learning experiences, good IT stuff. Their programs are all in place, and they could have worked if they chose to. My year 9 class went very well. In Australia, we have a thing called a NAPLAN test, and the NAPLAN test is every second year the students do a test, which is Australia-wide, and they get tested in 4 areas. They get tested in numeracy, literacy, spelling and grammar, and in writing. So one of those is mathematics, and the other 3 are language. And the year 9 group that I'd had for the time, but by the time the testing came around, I'd had them for 12 months. On the state averages that comes through an average, they went up 2%, which is not much.
Yeah.
But considering what was going on in the classroom,
exactly.
the school, the average was up 2%. But what was telling was in the 3 literacy areas, numeracy, writing, grammar and spelling, and reading, they went down between 12 and 16%, down. So my marks were on average 1 standard deviation above for numeracy than they were for the literacy areas. But of course that didn't count.
What's the
I was actually making... What's
your situation now?
Now I've appealed for unfair dismissal through the courts, and that's been... I've lost that appeal. I had to defend myself because using a lawyer was going to cost me $25,000 a day, and the hearing went for 6 days. It was anticipated to go for 3 days. I got a $75,000 quote for 3 days because there was a lot of material. And when I was in court, they had 3 people on the front bench, a lawyer and 2 education department lawyers, and then they had a crew of about 6 people from the department sitting behind them, taking notes and advising them on what to say and what not to say. So it was me against 9 lawyers from the department for a 6-day hearing.
Disgusting display of politics, isn't it? And power.
It is.
It's nothing to do with teaching kids, does it?
Well, they've spent a lot. Then I appealed the decision, and that was a 1-day one, and they still had the same crew or different crew of 9 people in with me, and I had a friend assist me for the appeal. And the appeal went for just the 1 day, and that was 3 weeks ago, and we haven't got a result of the appeal yet. But we had evidence and 9 grounds for appeal, and I'm not expecting to win, but the fact that they haven't come back and said we've lost within 3 weeks is actually a good sign. But I don't know how independent the Industrial Relations Commission government department will be.
Anyway?
Is what?
Would you go back to teaching after all this?
Look, I love teaching, and I'm a great teacher, and the relief teaching role that I did for 7 years, I really enjoyed that. The only problem is when I came and tackled the system and said this is wrong and tried to fix it. So I can go into a classroom and I can teach the students the trivium and get them to think. And as a casual role, when I'm not threatening to anybody, I can do good and enjoy what I do. So, but I've been black banned from teaching in Western Australia. And if you Google Colin Dixon teacher Perth, you can see a 100-page transcript of the trial where the magistrate bags me and calls me basically an evil, horrible teacher. And so I basically am unemployable as a teacher now.
You have a lot of other skills, don't you?
I do, yeah. There's other things I can do. And I'm just exploring those with the autonomy course at the moment.
So speaking of the autonomy course, how has it been for you? Run me through it from early days until now. How's it been for you?
It's been good. It's been excellent because as I said before, I spent 24 years in private enterprise working for myself, and the autonomy course is actually just going through refreshing all the things I used to do. But 10 years in government schools changes your way of thinking. So I've really needed this refresher to go back into being an independent mould, because the schooling system affects your confidence and your ability to be self-reliant. And so it's been the perfect vehicle for me at the perfect time.
I mean, from what I can see, you're definitely self-reliant. I love your camper van, man. I love it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I got divorced the second time at the end of 2007. And one of the, at that time I was renting a flat in Melbourne, a nice flat on the beach. And that was about $400 a week, so it was quite expensive. But I got a couple of flatmates in and rented out rooms to them for $200 a week each. And I had the third room. And then I started travelling. And so I worked out that, well, I'd reduced my accommodation costs to zero. Now,
Yeah.
there was a little bit of incidentals, but...
Yeah, your only maintenance and gas would be your only expenses, really.
That's right, yeah. So I kept the place, and I kept the place for 6 months and then let it go and moved on. But I started house sitting. So I found out that there were lots of places, and I started travelling. I did passion, and I travelled to where there was a house that was available. Did a nice house sit in Dunsborough, which is a beautiful place in Perth, and then I did a house sit in the Barossa Valley, which is a nice wine region. But later on, I started doing house sitting in places where I could teach. I started teaching again, and
it's great.
Yeah, so moved to a town like Albany, sit in the house, a free place to live, and do casual work teaching. There's a lot of schools in Albany, and because I'm male, which is unusual in teaching, and I'm specialised in maths and science, which is rare. Once I went around to knock on a few principals' doors and hand them my one-page resume, I started getting relief work. And one term I was in Albany, and I missed 3 days out of 10 weeks' work.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly added value to the course. It's always interesting to hear from you in the middle of the night. You're in your van, you're in the desert, you're in the city. You're always around. We always have to ask, where are you located now, Colin?
Yeah, I was doing the course one day. I was driving from Malakuta to Melbourne, and then I was on the internet on the phone with my Bluetooth headset on, listening to the program. When I arrived just as the Q&A finished.
That's great. Yeah. People from all over the world are on the course. There's a handful of other Australians on the course as well. It's been good getting to know everyone.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add? Anything else before I?
Oh, no, that was interesting. That's good. Yeah.
All right.
It'd be good to listen back to it, see what the recording's like.
Colin, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.